Welcome back to my podcast. This time, let's talk about how South America went through the ordeal of the Earth's axis shifting. The Andes Mountains have saved South America more than once throughout Earth's history. This also explains why the wildlife in South America is so unique and why the windward side of the Andes has ancient megalithic relics like Pumapunku and Machu Picchu. In this axis shift, South America's fate will be rewritten as the continent goes through a dramatic tearing apart. The Adam and Eve story describes this drastic change. In less than a day, Ecuador, Peru, and western Brazil are shaken madly by the devastating earthquake. The Andes are piled higher and higher by the Pacific's supersonic onslaught as it surges over itself against the mountains. The entire continent is burned by molten earth fire, buried under cubic miles of catastrophically violent seas, then turned into a frozen hell. Everything freezes. Man, beast, plant, and mud are all rock hard in less than 4 hours. Why does everything turn as hard as rock? Because they have moved to the Antarctic. South America has slid to the Antarctic, and the Himalayas have moved to the Arctic. The story continues. Europe cannot escape the onslaught. The raging Atlantic piles higher and higher on itself, following the screeching wind eastward. The Alps, Pyrenees, Urals, and Scandinavian mountains are shaken, then heaved even higher when the wall of seawater strikes. Western Africa and the sands of the Sahara vanish in nature's wrath, under savage attack by wind and ocean. The area bounded by Zaire, South Africa, and Kenya suffers only severe earthquakes and winds little inundation. Survivors there marvel at the sun, standing still in the sky for nearly half a day. Does the sun stand still for nearly half a day because the Earth's crust has stopped spinning? If Kenya is always facing the sun, wouldn't the far side, like New Zealand, be extremely cold? As the Adam and Eve story states, the temperature on the dark side drops to minus 80 degrees Celsius. Why are there so many mammoth remains found in the permafrost, with undigested grass in their mouths and even blood in their veins? This is evidence of the instant freezing from previous shifts in the Earth's axis. Let's continue looking at Eastern Siberia and the Orient suffer a strange fate indeed, as though a giant subterranean scythe sweeps away the Earth's foundations, accompanied by the wind in its screaming symphony of supersonic death and destruction. As the Arctic basin leaves its polar home, Eastern Siberia, Manchuria, China, and Burma are subjected to the same annihilation as South America. Wind, earth fire, inundation, and freezing. Jungle animals are shredded to ribbons by the wind, piled into mountains of flesh and bone, and buried under avalanches of homogenized seawater and mud. Then comes the sudden, seemingly infinite supply of terrible, instantly paralyzing temperature drop of 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Not man, beast, plant, muck, earth, nor water is left unfrozen in the entire Eastern Asian continent, most of which remains below sea level. Antarctica and Greenland, with their ice caps, now rotate around the Earth in the torrid zone, and the fury of wind and inundation marches on for 6 days. During the 6th day, the oceans start to settle in their new homes, running off the high grounds. On the 7th day, the horrendous rampage is over. The Arctic Ice Age is ended, and a new Stone Age begins. The oceans, the great homogenizers, have laid down another deep layer of mud over the existing strata in the Great Plains, as exposed in the Grand Canyon, Painted Desert, Monument Valley, and the Badlands. The Bay of Bengal Basin, just east of India, is now at the North Pole. The Pacific Ocean, just west of Peru, is at the South Pole. Greenland and Antarctica, now rotating equatorially, find their ice caps dissolving madly in the tropical heat. Massive walls of water and ice surge toward the oceans, taking everything from mountains to plains in gushing, heaving paths, while creating immense seasonal moraines. In less than 25 years, the ice caps are gone, and the oceans around the world rise over 200 feet with the newfound water. The torrid zone will be shrouded in a fog for generations from the enormous amounts of moisture poured into the atmosphere by the melting ice caps. New ice caps begin to form in the new polar areas. Greenland and Antarctica emerge with verdant tropical foliage. Australia is the new, unexplored continent in the North Temperate Zone, with only a few handfuls of survivors populating its vastness. New York lies at the bottom of the Atlantic, shattered, melted by earth fire, and covered by unbelievable amounts of mud. Of San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, Dallas, and Boston, not a trace is left. They all will join the legends of the 7 cities of Cibola. What's left of Egypt emerges from its Mediterranean inundation, new and higher, still the land of the ages. The commonplace of our time becomes the mysterious Baalbek of the new era. A new era. Yes, the cataclysm has done its work well. The greatest population regulator of all does once more for man what he refuses to do for himself and the planet on which he lives, and drives the pitiful few who survive into a new Stone Age. After this cataclysm, we join Noah, Adam and Eve, Atlantis, Mu, and Olympus, and Jesus joins Osiris, Ta'aroa, Zeus, and Vishnu. These fascinating descriptions come from the Adam and Eve story, a book that could be classified as science fiction or allegory. The book builds a well-developed and detailed story framework, showing that we are just a part of a repetitive cycle in the long river of history. Myths from various cultures, such as Noah's Ark, Adam and Eve, Atlantis, Mu, and Vishnu, are remnants of ancient civilizations. The disappearance of these civilizations was not due to continents sinking or ice ages, but rather dramatic changes caused by shifts in the Earth's axis and movements of the Earth's crust. Even more alarming, our Earth's magnetic shift is accelerating. Since 1998, the speed of this magnetic shift has increased from 15 kilometers per year to now 55 kilometers per year. Does this mean we are approaching the critical point predicted in the Adam and Eve story? Let's return to the evidence supporting these theories. Although the book lists 33 complex pieces of evidence, we can start with some more intuitive evidence discovered by enthusiasts. The Eye of the Sahara is believed to be the site of Atlantis, a city legend that many may have heard of. The concentric circle formation of the Eye of the Sahara resembles descriptions of Atlantis, sparking countless speculations. Enthusiasts have also found many similar large ripple marks near the Eye of the Sahara. What does this unique terrain signify? Do you remember Dr. Bretz? He proposed the channeled scablands, which left clear evidence on the Columbia Plateau. Later, similar prehistoric flood-formed terrains were discovered in other parts of the world. One is located in the Altai Mountains, where massive ripple marks appeared in the wilderness. Another is near the Osek River in Alaska, where the giant ripples are equally impressive. The last one is in the deserts of West Africa, where the earth ripples are even larger than the previous two. Imagine each of these ripples or hills standing 15 meters high, equivalent to the height of a 5-story building, with a daily water volume of an astonishing 730 billion cubic meters. Perhaps the destruction of Atlantis was similar to the scenes depicted in the movie 2012. Additionally, in the Adam and Eve story, after listing 33 geological pieces of evidence, the author provides a table. This table uses the evidence to estimate the starting points of the North Pole during past shifts of the Earth's axis and the time periods between these shifts. According to the analysis in the book, the legend of Atlantis might correspond to an axial shift that occurred about 11,500 years ago. During that shift, the North Pole moved from its current location in Hudson Bay, Canada, all the way to what is now the Sudan Basin. If Hudson Bay was the North Pole during the time of Atlantis, the location and climate conditions of Atlantis become easier to understand. The legendary Atlantis is said to have been in the Atlantic Ocean, at a similar latitude to Greece, meaning it was relatively close to the North Pole. However, in reality, we have not found any land in the Atlantic Ocean that matches the latitude of Greece. But what if the North Pole at that time was different and located in Hudson Bay? If the North Pole were in Hudson Bay, then the Eye of the Sahara and all of North Africa would suddenly become a piece of land in the middle of the ocean. Thus, its distance from the Hudson Bay North Pole would be similar to the distance from Greece to the current North Pole. This explains why the descriptions by ancient Greeks were accurate, and Egypt at that time might have been at the southernmost tip of this continent, a much hotter region. This theory could also explain why, anticipating an imminent catastrophe, the residents of Atlantis moved to the banks of the Nile River and built the Great Sphinx of Giza there. Why does the Great Sphinx show clear signs of water erosion? This might be because the region experienced dramatic climate changes and rapid sea level changes during shifts in the Earth's axis, causing significant erosion on this ancient statue. The possible truth might be this. During the Hudson Bay era of the North Pole, as the 11,500-year cycle was coming to an end, the residents of Atlantis realized they could not escape their fate and thus moved to Egypt. At that time, Egypt was a lush tropical rainforest. Here, they built the Great Sphinx and hid a hall of records, hoping to preserve evidence of their civilization and a hope for rebirth. Then, as scheduled, the axis shift 11,500 years ago occurred. The North Pole moved straight from Hudson Bay across North Africa and eventually settled in what is now the Sudan Basin. This might be the real reason why the Sahara transformed from a Garden of Eden into a desert. The water erosion marks on the Great Sphinx were likely not caused by long-term rainfall, but were formed instantaneously during this great disaster. Why did the Egyptians later need to recarve the head of the Sphinx? Perhaps because the original lion head had suffered severe weathering and erosion during the disaster, forcing later Egyptians to remodel it. Why did civilization rise again in Egypt after this great disaster? Perhaps this was a carefully calculated outcome by the previous wave of Atlanteans. With the North Pole moving to Sudan, Egypt shifted from a tropical to a temperate climate, and the pyramids and the Sphinx were structures designed to record and preserve their civilization. The table in the Adam and Eve story shows that the North Pole stayed in the Sudan Basin for about 5,000 years, from 11,500 to 6,000 years ago. During these 5,000 years, we also learn about the story of Noah's Ark. That's all for today's podcast. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's content, please like and subscribe to our channel. In the next episode, we will continue to explore more fascinating history and legends. Goodbye.